Good afternoon. We're going to go ahead and get this hearing underway. My name is Felipe Fuentes. I'm the chair of the Utilities and Commerce Committee. I'm joined today with Senator Padilla, who chairs the Senate Energy Committee. And today's hearing is with respect to the annual presentation to the committee from the President of the Public Utilities Commission. Public Utilities Code Section 1701.6 requires a President of the Public Utilities Commission to annually appear before this committee to report on the annual work plan for the PUC and to report on the number of cases that were resolved in a timely manner at the PUC. Section 321.6 requires the PUC to submit its annual work plan to the governor and legislature no later than February 1st of each year. This year, we are happy to have President Peavy return as the president of the PUC to discuss the work plan, and I invite Mr. Peavy to come on up now so he can address the committee. I don't see my chair, Mr. Smythe, here, but I do invite Senator Padilla to have some opening comments before we begin.
Thank you. Thank you. We'll figure this out sooner or later.
How about now? Try that.
Hello? Hello? There we go. Just to be brief, Chairman Fuentes sort of laid the foundation. This is the annual required presentation from the PUC, specifically the PUC president, to the committees in the legislature. As many people know, Chairman Fuentes and I went to high school together, and where we're from, sometimes it takes one guy to hold somebody's arms behind their back, and then the other guy just kind of does the 1-2 to the gut. So we thought we'd have a joint hearing today and have a list of questions for Chairman Peavy, whom we've had a pretty good working relationship with over the course of the last several years. So I know I have a slew of issues that I'd like to get into with questions, but I'll wait until after his presentation to do so. I want to acknowledge the presence and participation of the Vice Chair in the Senate Committee, Senator Bob Dutton, as well.
Chairman Fuentes, Chairman Padilla, Vice Chair Dutton, Members Swanson and Buchanan, Huang. It's a pleasure to be here before you in the Jess Unruh room as I look out and see that shining visage above us. Takes me back many a year. We presented to you a lengthy PowerPoint, run some 42 pages, and I won't try to go through every single page there, but I would like to beg your indulgence to hit on a few items, if I could, Chairman Fuentes. The first several pages kind of give an outline of the fundamentals of the Commission, what we do, whom we regulate, who we are, who we're appointed by, how long we serve, what our responsibilities and so forth are. The fifth page is on the energy industry, and I just want to point out that while we have every year, it's always a topic of some discussion about electric rate changes. You'll see that while they have increased since 2003 through 2009, that they have kept more or less in track with the CPI, the Consumer Price Index. We have not seen a rapid increase in electricity rates in this state in the past 6 years. That's the chart on page 6. And what we have seen, we've been able to help, I think, offset by an expansion in our CARE program and our low-income energy efficiency programs, which help those most in need. It's rather remarkable that this year utilities will provide over 4 million households with assistance under the CARE program. That's a large number of households, but it's also, I think, a reflection of the seriousness of the economic situation that this country faces at the moment. We have a major effort underway in the energy efficiency area, which we have been doing for some time, but it's been much expanded. For the period 2010, 11, 12, we'll be spending, or the utilities under our guidance will be spending well over $3 billion of that. That's indicated on page 8 and on page 9, where you see the breakdown there between the different sectors where the money will be spent, principally commercial, residential, industrial, and agriculture, and new construction. We're well on the way to implementing our smart grid rulemaking process and procedure following the enactment of SB 17 by Senator Padilla, which directed us to set up a deployment plan, which we have now underway. We are providing our customers with a lot of information in that regard, and it's a really interesting time. Smart meters are a part of it. I'm sure it's a topic that will get some attention today, judging by the members here and in the audience. We are now in the process of full-scale deployment of those meters at PG&E, Edison, and SDG&E. We expect that over 17 million meters will be installed, both electric and gas, by the end of 2012. Obviously, the meters provide a lot of data, consumption data, automatic data collection, timely detection of grid reliability issues, all the things that are essential to having an effective smart grid program are required. You have to have a smart meter program. There has been some significant amount of attention in some locales to the PG&E smart meter program. And I have to say that we are about ready to begin an evaluation of that program. I wish I was here today to tell you that we had picked the contractor. We did pick the contractor. Unfortunately, the contractor refused to sign the agreement with the PUC because of the contractor that would look into the effectiveness of the PG&E meter installation program and the accuracy of the meters, refused to sign the standard liability clause required in all state contracts in the state of California. That's a regrettable incident, I'm afraid, so it puts us back to again seeking to find. We ranked the contractors, and now we're in discussions with the second contractor, who we hopefully will come to conclusion by the end of next week. I'm sure there'll be questions on this, so I'll move on from there. We also have a very active, since we met last a year ago, alternative fuel vehicle rulemaking program, particularly EVs, electric vehicles, but also non-electric vehicles, where we're in the midst of an OIR that is looking at how to streamline the installation process for electric vehicles, what the impacts will be on the electric grid of electric vehicles, because there can be significant impacts on the distribution system in particular locales. What should be the regulatory treatment of third-party electric vehicle service providers, such as charging companies? What's the proper rate design and metering arrangements? Who pays for the infrastructure and distribution system? Then the role of the various parties in all this. That's ongoing. We will be completed later this year. I do want to highlight the California Solar Initiative. The state has more than doubled the installed solar capacity, that's distributed solar capacity, PVs, on the rooftops in the state over the last couple of years. We're now up to, with pending projects, 400 megawatts plus. I think that program, which the legislature adopted as SB 1 several years ago, is a significant success. I don't want to suggest it's not costly, because it is costly. What it does have success in the terms of the number of rooftops in which we have the solar distribution systems on them, the photovoltaic systems, and the cost is coming down, which was the whole intent of the program to begin with, as we went through it. I want to touch on the RPS, Renewable Portfolio Standard. You have stand that says that we're supposed to get to 20%, the state, 20% RPS by the end of this year. It's not going to happen. Be candid about it. It's more likely to happen in 2012 or 2013, maybe even 2014. I'm more hopeful earlier rather than later. There will be contracts signed for the 20%, but the actual delivery of electrons from renewables will not have happened by the end of this year or even the next year. We brought a lot of new stuff online. We've approved over 130 contracts representing 12,000 megawatts of power. It's a tremendous amount of power. If this all came online, you wouldn't need much of anything else. But between transmission constraints and financial constraints and all the other charges and limitations, it's been difficult to get the kind of success that I think any of us want to see in this. Amongst the utilities, Edison is at about 17%, PG&E is over 14%, San Diego's at 10%, roughly. Those are the percentage numbers of the 20%. So Edison's close, but not there. In transmission, we are working with the CAISO. We have the READY process, a Renewable Energy Transmission Initiative, to try to get everybody together to go work in the same direction to get transmission built. But I have to say it remains a very contentious issue wherever we go, whether it's the Tehachapi transmission line, the Sunrise transmission line, Devers to the River transmission line. There seems to be significant opposition to all these transmission facilities that people want to see built to deliver the renewables that we've committed ourselves to by statute. And that's the dilemma of how fast we can get some of that done. But it is coming along, and I'm more optimistic now than I was a year ago about the whole process. One other thing I want to mention is that we're now back in a modified direct access environment. The passage of Senate Bill 695 last year, Senator Kehoe's bill, which was an urgency statute and which was supported by a wide array of organizations, has reinstituted direct access in a limited fashion in the state of California. It had been suspended in 2001. So we just put out a decision that will allow, over a 4-year phase-in, to get back to the level of direct access that existed before the energy crisis. And that is, in itself, will create a lot of interesting change here in the state of California, because it had dropped to about 5% of the total was direct access, and now it's going to, I think it's all likely to go back up again to a significant number. In the natural gas area, just very briefly, we have, the PUC has been active in considering further development and expansion of natural gas infrastructure. The most important thing is that if you could buy gas when the price is low and you have enough storage capacity to fill it up in the summer months or in the spring months, then you have lower gas prices in the winter when otherwise the prices would be higher. We have a whole slew of storage projects before the PUC awaiting decision that will greatly expand that development. There is a chart you'll see on page 20 that shows you how monthly gas prices have jumped around over the past 3 years, and you can see that we're way below now the level. In fact, we're 50% below the level that was in existence only a little more than a year ago, year and a half ago, when everything was high. Gasoline was up $150 a barrel, or oil was, and gas prices track that very closely. In the communications area, we're under DIVCA, the implementation of the state-issued video franchises. I suppose if you're a strong believer in video competition, it's here. We have issued 102 video franchise licenses to 23 companies in the state since the passage of that legislation. AT&T and Verizon, I guess in part in response, have more than tripled the number of households they offer video to, and nearly 2/3 of all video customers in the state are now served by state video franchise holders. So it's been a very, very significant change. Regarding broadband, we've received money from the federal government under the stimulus bill, the ARRA. The PUC has to collect and do the detailed mapping of broadband in the state of California. That's going forward right now. I have to say that we have spent most of the money in the California Advanced Services Fund that helps subsidize or incentivize the spread of broadband to underserved and rural areas in the state of California. My frustration in this area has to do with the federal government. And in the first round of funds from NTIA, the state as a whole applied for $1.1 billion. We got $25 million. So that is proportionately a very, very disappointing number. And major projects like Highway 395 up in the lower east side of the Sierras, where the state, through the PUC, was putting up $19 million. The local sponsor was putting up $1 million. We'd applied for $80 million under the stimulus money. It was denied totally. We've had the same thing in other areas in the state. Nothing quite, perhaps, as dramatic as that. And so there'll be an effort again in a round two. But it does show you the frustration. Nonetheless, we have been expending this money under the CASF program, working with the California Emerging Technology Fund in a very positive way. And the funds are going to run out this year, I think, if we don't have some legislative extension, which I think is in the works. Regarding our Lifeline program, we provide discounted basic telephone service to about 2 million subscribers per month. That is, that we have the process that requires the utilities to do so, the communication companies. And we are working very much on trying to ensure that for those that are most in need, that Lifeline continues at a level and we provide a subsidy at a level that people can continue to have that single phone in their usually small unit in which they reside. We also have the California Teleconnect Fund, where we provide a 50% discount on telecom and internet services to schools, libraries, healthcare organizations, community-based organizations, and campuses of the California community colleges. And we have over 4,000 participants in that program. And community-based organizations in particular have dramatically increased the number participating in it. In the water area, we have a water action plan that we've developed. We're committed to reducing water consumption for the companies that we regulate by 20% by the end of the year 2020. But the PUC only regulates about 20% of the water industry in the state of California. Most of it is provided through municipal services and things like the MWD. But within the area that we provide and we regulate, we have done in the water industry what we've done in the electric industry, which is decouple sales and revenues, introduce tiered rates so there's an incentive for conservation of water and so forth. And set up for the 10 largest companies, there's over 100 water companies that we regulate, we have programs in place for low-income ratepayer assistance for water. And we have to realize that there's a close connection between water and energy. I mean, close to 20% of the electricity in the state is used in one way or another moving water around, all the way from your home to the massive pumping like at Sylmar and over the Tehachapi's. I could go on here, but I think that is probably hits some of the highlights in the subject areas we're involved in, and I think it's probably most useful to the committee if myself and my colleagues from the Commission open it up to your questions.
Thank you, President Peavy. If you could highlight for us or help us understand some of the work that the Commission is doing with respect to workforce investment, retention, job creation, are there any kernels of work there that you can share with us that is helping maintain jobs in this terrible economy?
Yeah, actually, about $110 million from our 210 to 12 program portfolio is dedicated to training-related activities, and it falls into three categories: education and training, through utility statewide training centers, training through traditional educational centers, including community-based organizations, community colleges, and pilot programs on residential heating, ventilation, air conditioning, and so forth. There's also a Workforce Education and Training Act pilot that we're conducting with PG&E and SoCal Gas to train students at San Francisco City College, LA Trade Tech, and elsewhere, and weatherization and measures, particularly for our low-income program. We have the California Solar Initiative, which is sponsoring a tremendous amount of increase in jobs for people in the installation of photovoltaics. We're strong supporters of Edison's program with the community colleges. So yes, there's a whole slew of programs that we are trying, although we're not a job agency directly, that we're trying to play a significant role in and be a stimulus for in a time of economic duress.
And is there, and recognizing that you're not a job training agency, it does sound like there's an awful lot of investment being made in training, but do you have any numbers or a process that you can share with us in terms of tracking the job creation? If you are tracking it, is it done by formula or actual payroll jobs?
We don't have in place an exact tracking mechanism. We could develop such a thing, and we could certainly call and request the utilities to show us data over time for that, and be happy to give that to the committee to develop and provide you with that.
I think that would
be interesting for ourselves too.
Yeah, no, I think it'd be very helpful. I mean, if we could have the utilities help us understand, retention and job growth, especially since we're talking about rate-based type dollars. You mentioned
we know we're creating jobs, and we're creating a lot of jobs. The programs like the weatherization program, the energy efficiency program, and the California Solar Initiative program. But we don't. It's true. We do not. I cannot come to you and say there's 26,421 jobs created. I wish I could.
And we'd like for you to. I mean, I think there's an awful lot that needs to be bragged about in terms of your stewardship on the commission, as well as that of the utilities and their participation in job retention and growth. And it'd be good for us, I think, to be able to highlight what that is. And we know that industries are changing. The hope is that there's net gains in jobs. But for us, I think it'd be very helpful to understand what the true picture is.
I agree with you on that. And I would just say one further word on that. We had some criticism last year in the Edison General rate case, but some of the extra monies went into job training and apprenticeship programs because they have a workforce. All the utilities have a workforce that is fast approaching retirement age, and it has to be replaced. These are skilled jobs, technical jobs, good jobs, and I wanted to strongly see the apprenticeship program and an expansion of those skilled jobs for people coming in. A broad array of people, particularly in this case in the Southern California service territory. Sorry for.
Well, appreciate that. You mentioned in your presentation a little bit about the electrification of the transportation system, and I'm just wondering if you can expand a little bit about what is being done to expand that. What is the PUC? I think you've got a case you mentioned pending on electrification. What's being done in terms of that, and what can we expect?
Well, in May of last year, we issued a white paper on electric vehicles, and then we began a rulemaking on alternative fueled vehicles, principally electric vehicles, in the fall. It's designed to look at the charging stations and the standardization of charging stations. If we're going to have a major development in electric vehicles, which we all hope, not just hybrids but pure electric too, we have to have some standardization of the charging system. You can't have it all be a pell-mell system. People go from home to shopping center to work. There has to be all standardization. That's something that the PUC, through the utilities, can ensure. We need to make sure that the grid is ready for it. Unfortunately, sales of things like EVs and hybrids are not going to be spread uniformly throughout communities. You're likely to find more in Beverly Hills and Piedmont than you are in some lesser income areas, and you might get, and in many cases, depending on the size of a person's home and so forth, when you charge up a car, you're taking half or even more than half of the electricity that is normally consumed in the house just for the charging of the car. You can't have all these and a whole bunch of EVs on a block without having significant problems for the distribution system. So we have to plan in concert with the utilities to how to build up the distribution system in such a case. We have to decide how we're going to handle and deal with charging, not just the standardization of charging, but who's going to put in the charging. Utilities don't seem particularly interested in doing that, but there are a whole bunch of companies that are interested in doing that. And what is their role? How does that all play out? Those are all critical issues just in this first phase. And Chairman Fuentes, we hope to have our decision the second quarter of this year, which is the April, May, June time frame.
Very good. I think Senator Flores had a question.
Thank you. I would like to, Mr. Peavy, if I could go over your page 11 on your particular page 11, your handout. And I think I would like to just very briefly, not take up the committee's time, but just to get a update. You gave us a brief one. But at the very bottom of page 11, you talk about my district, or at least half my district, Kern County, where in response to the high bill complaints, you mentioned the accuracy of the meters and data management billing systems, the assessment of that. And you mentioned that we are waiting for another contractor. And what would be the time frame for hiring the additional contractor? I didn't catch the time frame.
I hope by the end of next week.
Okay.
Certainly in the next 2 weeks.
Okay.
This has been a drawn-out process, and it's and unfortunately we have to operate under all the rules and regulations of the state of California on contracting. It's taken more and longer than I would have liked to see. We finally agreed. We ranked. We had the staff rank the top 5, and then the one that we chose.
Right.
Chose not to do business with us because nothing with the PUC directly, but because of the requirements on state liability and who has liability and its requirement in state contracts. As you know from some prior things, we've tried to, I mean, this gets complicated. But at any rate, by the end of next week.
Okay.
And we hope to have a report thereafter in 3 to 6 months.
Okay. And I think the reason I asked that, it's been about 5 months since the PUC announced that it would provide a third-party investigation. So, and it also, I believe, asked for an expedited process at that time. So I'm kind of wondering what an expedited process means 5 months later when people, I believe, as you roll, PG&E in this case rolled out quite a very large number, as you mentioned, in Kern County and in the Central Valley. Why wouldn't we have waited to do the third-party investigation or third-party evaluation first and then roll these out after, versus at this point in time, in essence, they're continuing to be put on homes. PG&E was telling Wall Street just last week that it estimated an expedited process putting more in this year. And it seems to me that while customers are waiting for what I think we would all want, which is someone to tell us in a neutral fashion that these are up and ready to go and they've been tested, why wouldn't we at this point just, in essence, wait for the particular expedited process or the contractor to finish their work, ask PG not to put any more meters in at this time?
Well, as a policy matter, we made a decision to state to replace all the electric meters and gas meters, by and large, although that's outstanding in the case of SoCal Gas, with new smart meters is an essential part of the overall smart grid program. We, at the same time that PG&E, just to give context here, has been putting in meters, let's be candid, the other utilities have been putting in meters too. Edison's put in over 2 million meters. Right here in the city that we're now occupying, SMUD is in the process of putting in all new meters right here. You're good if you were a SMUD property, you'll get a door hanger or you'll get a notice saying you're going to do this, and here's the facts and all that.
But none of those utilities you just mentioned claims that they rolled them out the way PG&E did. In fact, they had much more testing, much more test casing. Edison, for example, in Pico Rivera, SMUD, we've talked to, they've rolled it out in a different fashion. So I don't think it's fair to say they're all rolling it out. PG&E had a different way of rolling it out, and it's the reason it seems there seems to be so
That's
much
why we're looking at it, isn't it? I mean,
Right.
you've been
Do you-
on the cutting edge of pushing us to do this, and that's why
Right.
we're doing it.
Right.
In the PG&E case, we've had, just further context, I don't have the exact numbers right in front of me here, but we've had like 1,000 questions and complaints statewide in this. Now, PG&E's put out over 4 million meters. Edison's put out over 2 million meters. There's probably 7, 8 million meters. So you get a numerator denominator here. We've had less than 1,000 complaints. Less than 1,000. Most of them have been from PG&E in the PG&E service territory. Most of them have been along the lines that you have suggested in other venues. That's why we're doing the investigation of PG&E. I wish I was here to tell you that we had the contractor up and running, testing the meters and looking into how they rolled all this out right this moment. I'm sorry to say, believe me, I would like to have it. I knew this was scheduled, but it just didn't turn out that way.
And did the PUC ever have any hearings in these high complaint areas itself as a body?
Well, I'm not sure how to answer that question. We certainly participated in community events in Fresno and in Bakersfield.
But as a body,
At your instigation.
regulatory body, have you ever had a hearing
No.
in an area with such a disproportionate amount of complaints? It's one way to address the complaints is to allow forum for, as a body, for folks to tell you their story, because you are the PUC.
Right. Well, no. We have. There are many means to communicate with the PUC. And believe me, I'm the beneficiary of many of them. But
Sure.
No, we have not had a specific in Kern County. No.
And just last question, I don't want to monopolize the time of the committee, but would it be fair to say that the PUC at this point in time is going to do something with these complaints? In other words, you mentioned 1,000 or so. What do you plan to do with
We
the
follow up on
complaints?
every complaint that we get and look into the merits of it. And obviously, we'll pay particular attention to, in the case of PG&E, because of the sensitivity to it. No, I think we've had less than 10 complaints in the Edison service territory, I think is the number. Less than 20. And they put in over 2 million meters.
They did, and they did a wonderful job of rollout that's quite different than PG&E, so which might make the case that maybe the PUC should have required PG&E to have the same type of rollout as Edison or SMUD or some of these other utilities.
And I think that's a fair comment and implied criticism. On the other hand, you have to say that PG&E was offered and went first in rolling out the meters. So we all learned a bit, and I think we've all learned something from the past 6 or 8 months.
We have, and PG&E then had to go back to the PUC and ask for an additional $500 million because they didn't put on the right smart meter. Is that correct?
Well, yeah, that's a judgment call. I mean, what they did was they went first. They said, we'll be the first ones. We're willing to go. We'll take this off-the-shelf meter. Some people said, well, maybe it ought to be a little more advanced than what you're doing. They said, no, we'd like to try this. We said, eventually we considered, okay, go ahead and try it. And it turned out to have been a mistake.
Right. Who paid for that mistake?
The people, the ratepayers.
Okay, thank you.
Assemblymember Skinner.
I wanted to go back to the line of questioning Assemblymember Fuentes was asking regarding some of the job creation activities, which I'll put it a different way. The energy efficiency programs that you were describing in the beginning of the presentation, obviously some of those are job creating because they motivate or fund entities that then do installation, or different changing of devices and such to increase the efficiency of buildings in the state. We now have the stimulus funds going into all of our cities and counties to do retrofit work. The Assembly passed and the Governor signed AB 758, and we have the Energy Commission developing the initial regs, which they are supposed to do in coordination with CPUC. Can you imagine that some of the funds that the PUC recently committed, the increase in fund commitment to energy efficiency, might be coordinated with either the recovery through the federal recovery through retrofit program or the 758 program? And could you comment on that?
Well, yes. I mean, I think to some extent it's definitely should be coordinated. But I speak as an economist. I mean, the biggest problem we have, honestly, in this country in terms of job creation right now is the money is stuck in the pipelines. DOE comes up with a stimulus package, $37 billion, and last year they spent $2 billion. And when they say they spent it, then it goes to some state agency and then to government agencies. It doesn't actually get out in creating jobs in many cases. So I'm all for coordination and working with other agencies, very much so in the state of California. But I also know that that the energy efficiency programs that the utilities know how to do, because they've been doing them, the weatherization programs and the replacement of refrigerators and replacement of air conditioning and a whole array of those kind of programs. Put more money in, they can spend the money quicker, rather than just having it all clogged in the systems. Like we got arteriosclerosis. I mean, I'm being very serious about this as a society, and that's one of the reasons why people are so upset. You see all this money being spent, quote unquote, and yet there's no direct job stimulation and creation, except the kind of programs like weatherization, where we know when you put the money out and you have 50,000 homes that you're going to weatherize in Southern California this year, that it creates X number of jobs. And we know that $1 billion spent, not accumulated, spent, will create 22,000 jobs directly. I mean, that's what we know from the economic impacts of this stuff. But it's not happening. And so at the speed that I would like to see it happen, it's not happening at the speed by which I think the society needs it to happen. And so I am all for the coordination and working with others, but if it gets clogged in the pipeline, I think that doesn't serve anybody's interest.
Well, that was part of the motivation of my question, is that given that the PUC has administered the Public Benefits Fund and the utility programs, and given that there is an infrastructure that exists, whether there's the ability to use that infrastructure in a way that I'm completely supportive of the refrigerator programs, the various programs, but those don't necessarily cause a full retrofit of a building. And so what I guess I'm trying to get at, and it's not really fair to ask you just on the fly like this, but it's more that as we do this planning, and I don't mean just planning, but as we do this deployment, if we couldn't coordinate better with our utility programs, given that they that they have the infrastructure and they cover so many ratepayers or customers within the state.
And my answer is yes. But with the caveats I said, that I want to make sure the money is spent quickly rather than it sits in bank accounts at the state level and at the local government level. I mean, I don't know if I'm making myself effectively clear, but the Wall Street Journal had an article a couple months ago that I just give you as it doesn't affect California directly, but it was the state of Massachusetts seeking DOE, U.S. Department of Energy approval to spend $100 million in weatherization in the state of Massachusetts, and DOE said we have to do a NEPA exam report.
Right.
NEPA, national, that's 7 months long to study something that, in my judgment, on its face is desirable to do and shouldn't, because it's a CO2 reduces greenhouse gases and so forth, and we shouldn't have to go through all those steps. That's why I said I think, you know, in many ways we have arteriosclerosis in our whole system. And I want to see the money spent quickly, and I want to see it spent in California, and I want to see people get to work again.
Just on
I know
final thought on that. Have you considered, say, just for, you know, an interim period of, say, 2 years or something, shifting some of the utility monies away from, say, refrigerator rebates and more towards, so that there's more funds in the retrofit type of programs that would bring down, that would deal with the building envelope, bring the bills down more substantially, and also obviously have a more direct job creating.
I think that's a very interesting point, and I think I'll take it back with me to think it through. Because if I had my way, to some extent, I would like to see us be able to go through communities almost block by block doing retrofits in homes. I mean, I think total retrofit,
Yes.
the whole thing, not just taking out a refrigerator or putting in a new dishwasher if people have a dishwasher or all. I'd like to see the whole thing
Yes.
done. But we haven't set up a mechanism to do that. Instead, we give tax cuts and we give tax incentives. You get $1,000, $1,500 off. You do this, you do that, and it's tough to measure the impact of all those things, except at the most micro level in Washington D.C. And it's frustrating. So I think your point,
Right. So, but within
Skinner, is a good one.
within the funds that CPUC then governs, you might have the possibility to do that, at least in a.
I think that's certainly worth consideration. I'm sure there are many, many questions that would go into that, but I think it bears a serious exam.
Senator Lowenthal.
It's just a follow-up. I'm just thinking it through. But the question really is how successful, and I know it's a little off when we talk about retrofits, that we really talk about, and as you pointed out before, or indicated before, as we move more towards electrification, potentially, especially of our transportation fleet, which how successfully and how much tied into these other programs is the photovoltaic of residential facilities? How are we doing? Is the PUC the place I should be asking for this?
Well, there's several different photovoltaic programs. The principal one is at the public. You passed here
Right.
the successor to the Million Solar
Million
Roofs
Solar
program.
Roofs.
Yeah, but it became SB1, and Kevin Murray was the author and all that. We are the principal implementer for most of that program. The CEC is the principal implementer and the only implementer for under new construction, new housing. We have the retrofit and all, or not the retrofit, but the placement on existing housing, commercial and residential, commercial, industrial, and residential. As I said, that program now, there's over approximately 400 megawatts that's either installed or in the pipeline. Prices are coming down. I think that you could see that program runs till 2017. I think that you could say that program is off to a very successful start. That's one solar program. But the other piece is the municipalities. DWP, the Los Angeles Department of Water and Power, SMUD, others all have obligations too to do solar programs, photovoltaics, and time will tell how successful those programs are, and that's under the domain also, at least in the reporting area of the Energy Commission. So we have those are two. Then in addition, we have the Public Utilities Commission. We have approved a proposal by Southern California Edison Company to put in 500 megawatts of rooftop solar on industrial and largely warehouse space in their service territory. We've approved that program. 250 of it would be owned by Edison, the solar collectors, the PVs, and the other 250 would be done by independent sellers, if you will. And that program is off to a fast start. I think it's fair to say there are several buildings now that's been installed. I've toured some, walked around the rooftops of some of them. And then PG&E has a similar program that is awaiting a commission decision right at this moment for the same size. And then San Diego has a smaller program that befits its size. So we have a combination. These are just the photovoltaics now.
Right.
We're not talking about Central Station.
And I understand that, and I'm just interested in one part of that, and just how successful, because you linked the industrial, the commercial, and the residential. How successful is the residential part of that program going is the one are we moving in a direction that will be able to relieve a lot of the grid, especially as we move more towards electrification and transportation and others, that people can be plugging in their own homes?
Yes, and I should have to be very cautious to give credit to anybody sitting up there, but certainly the governor's signature of Assemblywoman Skinner's
I know.
bill on net energy metering will give a further impetus to this program.
Okay.
I should add, though, that these are not cheap programs. These photovoltaic programs are not cheap. I mean, that's
Assemblymember Swanson.
President Peavy, thank you for your testimony. If maybe I missed it, but out of this 45-page slide presentation, I didn't see a slide addressing the question of equal opportunity or access. Am I correct that there's no slide to address that question?
I think you are correct.
I'm not to assume from that that there's not any issues around equal opportunity, access, or participation from minorities and women that have been erased with the PUC.
Okay. Well, I mean, I think you're talking to someone that's been a champion of diversity in this, and the numbers speak for themselves. We're doing, under the PUC's leadership, I think we're doing a very good job in diversity, both in terms of minority and women-owned businesses, and less so with disabled veterans. And the numbers have gone up every single year, very dramatically. Every single year we have a hearing where all the CEOs of these companies come and appear before us. We'll be doing that again. We give a report to the legislature on this. We just put out the numbers. 21.5% is the goal for the utilities for the three areas: minority business, women-owned businesses, and disabled veterans. And every major utility, and this includes some of the water companies, every major energy and communication utility but one exceeded the 21.5%, and some, such as San Diego Gas and Electric, were over 30%. So we're doing, I think, a very good job there, and I'm happy to engage.
Well, it would help us in a presentation like this if you just share those numbers with us.
Well, we give a separate report to the legislature.
Yes,
on this,
no.
but I'm happy to do that, and that's.
Yeah, I understand through the chair, of course. And the reason I raise this is because our office and I'm sure other offices have received a lot of concern about what these opportunities are. I know the Green Lining Institute had a report on the state of solar and the solar industry and how deficient their report said the solar industry was on job creation, diversity of job creation, and board membership and that sort of stuff. And you do see it as part of the PUC's responsibility then to investigate, your oversight responsibility to investigate this issue of contract opportunities and how, in fact, the people of California are benefiting in terms of equality and these opportunities that have been presented.
Our responsibility is much greater than just investigate. Our responsibility is to ensure that this occurs, and I think that the record would bear us out that in the last 5 years we've done very well. But that's not to say we couldn't do better.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Assemblymember Buchanan.
I have two areas I'd like to talk about briefly. And one is just a comment following up on Assemblymember Skinner's questioning, because this is now I think it's the third or fourth hearing I've been in talking about the ERA funds. And, from the public's perspective, the bill was passed over a year ago to get money out to create jobs. And in California, we've got 12.5% unemployment. And as an economist, if 5% is full employment, we've got to create about 1.3 million jobs in this state. And so it's a real heavy lift. And we hear from everybody that, well, the program's going to start to get going now. So it seems like we've got those clogged arteries everywhere we go. So to the extent that in the legislature we can support getting that money to you faster or from you out to the contractors faster, or any other ideas, whether it's shifting some of the appliance rebates as she suggested, or your idea of going into neighborhoods, which would be much more efficient, we know, to just to weatherize all the houses instead of others. Could you let us know? Because I do think it's critically important that we spend those funds as efficiently as we can, and we also get them out as quickly as we can, because people in the state are hurting. And then my other question, you talked about or brought up briefly the Southern California Edison rate increase that generated some discussion. And based on my notes, Southern Cal Edison originally asked for a $3.1 billion increase. The administrative law judge lowered that to 1.3, and I believe you ultimately granted a $2 billion increase. And we're in a time right now where you said earlier in your presentation that we've got 4 million people who are dependent on some kind of assistance to be able to keep the lights on in their home. So as we move forward with other rate increases for the utility companies, how are you balancing that need to keep, to allow companies to make a profit, which I think they should be able to have a fair return on their investment, keeping the rates low so we don't end up with 5 million people on assistance, and the need to create jobs? I mean, what are you doing given the tough economic times we have here?
I mean, that's what the job's all about. I mean, that's the responsibility. Try to balance all these factors. I won't quarrel with you about those numbers from the Edison case. They seem too large, but it's true that in that particular case, I mean, I'm going to take the bullet right here, that I supported a higher increase than did the administrative law judge, because I thought, frankly, that the money ought to be invested in people. And that's what the commitment was, and that's what the additional funds went to. For, as I said earlier, for apprenticeship, job training, and replacement of retiring workforce.
And that's important. Do we know then, by investing that, have we been able to put those people into jobs?
Yeah, the apprenticeship programs have grown, and the layoffs that could have occurred didn't occur. And this is, you face this. This is every day. You have to deal with this right here in the Capitol. How do you stimulate jobs? How do you create this and that? It's very difficult, because unlike the federal government, you don't have the ability to print money quite so freely.
On that point, I think it just further illuminates how important it is if there's a mechanism for us, or for you all rather, at the PUC, to work with the utilities and track that if we're going to go ahead and ask for more from the ratepayer, then how much more are we getting in terms of jobs and that sort of thing. So I don't have a suggestion today, but I would like to work with you to figure out if there's a process that we could get the PUC to adopt that asks the utilities for that type of information, so we know what our bang for our buck is.
I think that's a very good point, and we're going to do that. I mean, I'm very interested in doing that now, and it's building on what Assemblywoman Skinner said, too, about the job impacts, energy efficiency, and other things, and getting a more precise measurement and number of these. I mean, we have these gross numbers, and maybe we can't do a heck of a lot better than that, but we could try, and that's something I'm going to put some effort into personally.
And I mean, I can certainly appreciate the wanting to invest a little bit more in that particular case, and it's a matter of illustrating where that investment went. On that note, I'm going to ask you if you could look into your crystal ball and tell us what you think the rates could increase, if there was increases projected in your mind in 2010, and what would those increases look like?
I mean, for the next couple of years,
for the next,
for example?
Since we're talking rates here and
well,
investment.
As the chart that I pointed out shows you, they basically tracked the cost of the CPI, or cost of living increase, for the last 8 years. I think that you could probably pretty much anticipate something along that line for the next couple of years. You cannot expect rates to go down when we have programs like the CSI and others that have an upward push on rates. However, you could moderate it, and the attractive thing about energy efficiency programs and all is you get more bang for your buck. I mean, that's why it's number one in our priority list at the CEC, here, and state government generally, that energy efficiency comes in first, because it's the cheapest. You get maybe payoff of 2 to 1 on energy efficiency, and that makes it very attractive. But I think you're going to see some upward creep, honestly. I could get up here and say we'll do everything we can to make sure that doesn't happen. But I don't think that's intellectually honest on my part.
Senator
I
Dutton.
said an upward creep. I didn't say Herculean or massive rate increases. I don't want to be misrepresented here, quoted, but.
Yeah. Good afternoon, Mr. President. There, I'm a little concerned about on the energy situation with regards to job creation. My concern is more trying to retain existing jobs in the private sector. There's been a couple of businesses that I was kind of surprised when I saw them locating to other states, and one of the things that were indicated, Facebook going up to Oregon, energy cost was one of their considerations because they're a high energy user. Same thing with a couple of other companies too. Apple, as a matter of fact, went to North Carolina. What I'm concerned about, it seems like California is doing a pretty good job, actually doing an excellent job as far as efficiencies go, but we just keep piling on more regulations trying to achieve a higher renewable than, frankly, just about anybody else in the country. At least that's what I'm hearing. I'd like your input. Do we have a realistic, when we define renewable and what's qualified to be included and not included in the plants that are eligible for purchase to achieve the renewable, are we being realistic or are we being unrealistic?
Well, I think we're being realistic, but it's a legislative definition.
Well, I understand. I'm asking
you have the power to
your
change it if
professional
you don't
opinion.
like it.
Well,
yeah.
I would if I.
I mean,
don't
what's
like it,
renewable is geothermal. It's all kinds of solar. It's biomass. It's wind.
I'm asking your opinion as somebody who's been involved,
Right.
very well respected in the energy business. Does the legislature, have they given the power industry a reasonable definition for what we should be looking at on renewable?
Largely.
Did you say in hydroelectric that we're being reasonable?
I think hydroelectric is an interesting question. I mean, I think that some years ago there was an effort to define as non-renewable any hydro project over 30 megawatts because nobody wanted to see anything that size built. New York State, Maine, most of the United States considers hydro to be, regardless of size, to be renewable. Okay. We say run of the river and under 30 and under would be renewable, but the larger is not. You see it most graphically in a company like PG&E. I mean, if PG&E was able to count all its hydro, it would be over 33% today, and we haven't even talked about nuclear. So I mean, so you see the difference here. I mean, and you define it, but.
But that becomes part of my concern because it just seems like realistically if hydroelectric is supposed to be good, and obviously in PG&E's case they do have a plant that's not allowed to be included, we're artificially kind of bumping the energy prices beyond where we need to, which is actually a deterrent towards job growth in the private sector. And that's what my concern is trying to find that balance and trying to be more realistic.
The flip side of that, though, is, and to be fair, is there's nothing magical about 33%. I mean, for certain places, that's the right suited number, perhaps. I mean, San Diego, they don't have the opportunities for hydro and all. PG&E built most of its hydro plants years ago. I mean, it's an old system, largely depreciated, which does produce low costs. I mean, it helps balance out their costs. So it's it gets kind of tricky here. I think that over time the whole notion here is in significant part is to create a more sustainable energy system that relies less on fossil fuels and more, and that includes natural gas and certainly coal, and more on renewable energy. And there's a cost to be borne with that. But as we've seen with the subsidization in the past to wind, now wind can pretty much stand on its own in costs. It's come down very significantly in cost. The hope is that central station solar and photovoltaics, they have come down in cost. Will they continue to come down in cost? I would hope, and I think it's highly likely. It's certainly the premise on the California Solar Initiative. If they do, then we will have achieved a lot here, because California then can be a leader not only in the United States, but in export of knowledge, maybe not the technology in terms of actually building it, but of the knowledge in the development of this worldwide. And frankly, it's in our long-term interest to do that. So these are difficult balances. I
actually
do
more
not disagree with that.
I appreciate the long-term analogy, but I'm actually concerned about the hardship that we're creating on the short term to achieve the long-term
Yeah, I
objective.
understand.
Because one of the challenges that we're going to have, and from what I'm hearing from the various people that I've talked to, when looking at trying to do a pro forma on a piece of property, something like that, you do look at energy costs and you look at projections, and I'm seeing anywhere from 15% all the way up to 30% increases almost annually. Now, I appreciate the greater efficiencies will help you absorb some of that, but it's not really helping my bottom line, because dollar-wise, I'm still going to be costing me more. Matter of fact, Big Bear, I was talking to their municipal power company up there, and their cost to achieve our renewable definition, they're going to be looking at double the cost of the contract just from last year to this year. Now, they don't have a lot of businesses and everything to pass that on to. It's all residential users. So I'm just concerned. I just wanted to bring it up because while I think the goals and objectives are reasonable, the fact of the matter is, it is one of the reasons we're creating a deterrent on job creation in the private sector. And if we don't get a handle on trying to create a reliable, sustainable energy supply that's also affordable, then we can say we're saving everybody all this money, but the fact of the matter is, it's costing them more to be. The more efficient they become, the more it's costing them, and so.
Someone like
concerned.
Big Bear is small relative to the others.
Oh, yeah, but there's a lot of small communities.
And it's very difficult for them to do this, and they have to partner with a bigger entity, whether it's an Edison, whether it's some municipal. I don't know the exact answer, but to do that, I mean, that's happened before, and that would alleviate some of this, honestly.
Mm-hmm. Oh, and also too, we don't allow coal as well. That's some time ago, and we're going to have a problem with some of the proposals coming up. Now, this won't be under your area, but there again, because you're kind of the energy expert here, I'm a little concerned about some of the long-term coal contracts and how in the heck we're going to achieve. How does that figure into the renewable? Do you just do it on a agency basis? I mean, company by company basis?
I think everyone would agree that coal is not a renewable.
Yeah. No, I do, but you got some long-term contracts that are out there with the municipals. A lot of their contracts went out to 2027, and there's no way they're going to hit that.
And the biggest municipal is the Los Angeles Department of Water and Power, which gets practically half of its energy from coal, and it's announced that it will be non-coal by 2020. And so last week's LA Times reported they were going to increase rates by 2.7 cents a kilowatt hour. It's a big number. None of our investor-owned utilities have faced anything quite like that yet. It's a very aggressive effort. But the answer for coal is we have to learn how to use coal in a way that doesn't have a CO2 impact, and that's what we're trying to do in Kern County with this hydrogen energy effort and all, because, well, the rest of the world, a lot of the rest of the world is totally dependent on coal, and regardless of what we do, we're going to get overwhelmed by what the world does if we don't help the world learn how to manage its resources better. And that's one of the reasons why, Senator, I think it's important for California to invest in technology to the maximum extent possible in our universities, in our national labs, and everywhere, and to lead by example, hopefully, as well as exhortation, but principally by example.
Yeah, I just don't want to throw the baby out with bathwater.
I would agree with that.
Thank you.
Assemblymember Huffman.
Thank you. President Peevey.
We're implementing the water, the solar hot water heating bill, we're doing that.
That's on my list. Thank you. And, I do want to thank you for your cooperation and your leadership on that one. So all I really have to ask you about AB 1470 and the solar hot water heater, since you responded with that one, is can you give me a little bit of a status update, and when will the program be rolling out?
Julie? You want a quick answer? When will the program be rolling out? You'll have to await your answer, as frustrating as that is.
All right.
We'll let you know tomorrow.
I will accept that and move to one of my other favorite bills that's pending before you, AB 920, the surplus net metering legislation that was passed last year. And I wanted to ask about the status of that proceeding and whether there were going to be advice letters coming out.
And I'll ask Julie again if she wants to respond to that. Just come on up here. This is Julie Fitch, who is the director of our energy division.
Thank you.
So on AB 920, I'm not 100% sure on the timing, but I know that that proceeding is underway. So I expect probably in the summertime, but I can certainly, if we update you on the solar hot water, I'll update you on the exact timing of that as well.
Okay. I appreciate that very much, and I know that you've got a lot of work to do in the months ahead to try to figure out a reimbursement price that's fair, which of course was what the legislation was all about, not full retail obviously, but also one that has the virtue of simplicity and works for both the utility and the customer. In that regard, I'm informed that 2 of the 3 investor-owned utilities are suggesting a simple crediting mechanism, which sounds like a smart idea to me, and certainly one that's consistent with the legislation. So I would just urge you, as you do that work going forward, to keep simplicity in mind. This has to be something customers can understand and utilities can implement, and I'm sure that you'll get it right. I wanted to ask you also about virtual net metering for multifamily units. That's something that I think many of us are concerned with. We run into a lot of constraints when we try to promote CSI and other renewable programs in the area of multifamily housing. And virtual net metering seems like a very creative idea, one that I think you're taking a look at. So I wondered if you could speak to that.
And I'll let her speak to that. But we're quite aware of this need to act in the area of multifamily housing, particularly lower income, not most affluent housing. And it is difficult, and it's almost like slogging through, the jungles. I mean, you have to deal with the property owners and a lot of resistance and a lot of lack of understanding of this. But
I would just add that I think we're trying it out sort of with baby steps. It's a fairly complicated thing to do, not only from the point of view of what President Peavy just said, but also from the utility billing point of view, and we're sort of working out the kinks. So I know there's a lot of interest in this area, but we'd like a chance to try it out a little bit longer to see if we can make it work in a more streamlined basis before we, I know it's an appealing idea for lots of different venues, but we're not quite sure we're ready to go full scale with it yet.
Okay. Well, I want to, for my last question, take you over into telecommunications. And something that I'm hearing from companies that provide prepaid wireless services, they feel, even though that's the fastest growing segment of wireless service, they feel like there may be a fair amount of regulatory confusion about what fees they are required to pay, what fees some in the industry are paying and some may not be paying. So specifically with respect to 911 and other public policy program fees, what is the current thinking of the PUC in terms of the applicability of those to prepaid wireless, and then also the best method of collecting those fees, whether it's at the point of sale or some other method?
Unfortunately, I did bring with me today the head of our communications division, Jack Lutza, who's going to answer that question.
I'm requiring you to go deep into your bench with these questions.
That's perfectly all right. That's why we have the front row filled. No.
Good afternoon, Senator Huffman. I'm Jack Lutza.
I'm just a lowly assembly member, but thank you.
I'm sorry.
You're just sitting between senators. So
yes. On the subject of prepaid wireless and that industry segment's obligation to pay PUC fees, the current thinking is that there is an obligation to pay fees the way that the wireless company certificates to operate in California are written. But as you point out, the industry has pointed to the fact that the original language that applied probably predates the current form of prepaid wireless, and one of the major carriers has asked the Commission to look at that, and it is something that will be coming up before the Commission in a formal proceeding in the next couple of months.
If it's determined that point of sale is the proper way to, well, A, that the fees are fully applicable to prepaid, and B, that point of sale is the best way to collect it, do you feel like the PUC has enough existing authority to go ahead and implement that, or do you believe there may be a need for some statutory authority?
I think that the method of collection is one of the things that the Commission look in response to the industry request will come up with, and I think that the degree to which our authority applies will evolve in that context, and it could be that there might be a need for some additional authority. But it's not known at this point.
All right. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
You know, President Peavy, you mentioned a little bit about energy efficiency, and I'm glad that you mentioned that. I mean, it's very related, obviously, to the costs of the current programs that we have. And you've got, I think, a figure of $3.13 billion in terms of energy efficiency programs. Can you just spend a little time helping us understand what the latest and greatest is and how you got to that figure, and how much energy savings you expect to be achieved by this investment?
Well, the way that we got to the figure, I mean, the utilities proposed about $4 billion, and the test for us is it has to be cost effective. In other words, you have to get, if you spend one, you have to get back at least $1+ in improvements, direct improvements and all. And after going through a lengthy proceeding, and you know, everything the PUC does, as Jack alluded to in another context entirely, we have proceedings. We have administrative law judge render a decision. We have cross-examination. We have attorneys. It's nothing is done in the speed of light, believe me. But the test, and we applied the same test for several times now, on energy efficiency, is it cost effective? Where do you get the most bang for your buck? And we came to the conclusion that 3.13 billion dollars for the 3 years that we're now in is the appropriate number. If you change the assumptions, it could be higher than that, actually.
I guess what would be helpful for me to understand is how does the PUC encourage the utilities to pick the better projects, for the ones with the most investment? I mean, how do you compel them to do that?
Well, we have no problem compelling. I mean, that's one of the things about a regulatory body like the Public Utilities Commission. It can compel, but what we and order. I mean, literally order things to be done. But we've tried to move in this area away from that toward a incentive system where the utilities themselves are incentivized to pick the most effective, and we monitor what they do, and we examine and monitor and review what they do. But we set up an incentive system where if they hit the goals that we set for them, they can earn X dollars, and if they fall below that but are still above a certain band, they get Y dollars, and if they fall below 65%, they lose money and they have to pay the reimbursed ratepayers. So there is a whole incentive mechanism to now to have them working with us do the most effective things. And frankly, standing alone, these programs like refrigerator replacement are very effective, because refrigerators are, I mean, everybody, so many people have old refrigerators, 10 years old. I mean, the new refrigerators are 2 or 3 times more efficient than the old ones, and people put them in their garage. They have it in there to, you know, to keep some, this or that, and but the point that was being made about a more omnibus program, I think, bears some careful examination. I'm intrigued with that idea, but that's very effective. Air conditioner replacement is very effective. Weatherization, just plain weatherization, double painting of windows, all those things are extremely cost effective, and that's plus a whole array of other programs that the utilities undertake. And with our monitoring and with our evaluation as to whether they're doing it as effective as they could, and they get a financial return for doing it. And the better they do, the better they'll earn. And if they fall below, as I said, 65% of the achievement, they lose money.
Now, is it the case that if they don't make their goals, they're not given the incentives?
No, they get, well, no, they get an incentive. It depends. If they
It's
get
tiered.
to a certain goal, they get to be at 85% of what would be an ideal number. And then if they exceed that by another number, then they would get 100% of what we would award them. And if they fall below 65%, they lose money.
Now, to be fair, we talked about the utilities. What about state agencies? How are you compelling them to maximize their energy efficiencies, given the large footprint that the state has in
Well, I
its
think
fleet?
it's fair to say we're not. I mean, we're really not in a position to force the Department of General Services to do things. I mean, we could try.
It just seems to me that we should lead by example, doesn't it? I mean,
Yes, I would say that.
Is there any coordination in the governor's office
Yes,
or on?
yes, with DGS, yes, there is, and we work together on programs like fuel cells.
And so how are we
and all
doing?
that? But it is not. There's a lot of siloing in government, in state government.
Well,
Not
I
as
would-
much as at the federal level, but enough to.
Very willing to work with you to figure out if there's ways that we can compel them.
I mean,
via
there's a whole
statute.
green buildings program the state has. DGS, we have people working with them. We're one of our top energy efficiency people working with them. But we don't have the regulatory ability, the compulsion aspect of what we have with the investor-owned utilities.
Very good. Senator Padilla?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just wanted to sort of do a bad little cleanup here. A lot of the questions that I had coming in have been asked, but there's still a few issues that haven't come up. So I'll sort of try to do a speed round here with Chairman Peavy. I know the issue of smart meters has come up already, but I'm wondering if you can't take maybe 30 or 60 seconds and elaborate a little bit more on the difference between electric smart meters versus the natural gas smart meters, and to the extent that you can comment on the item that was in the PUC agenda last Thursday that I understand was held over for 30 days, the SoCal Gas rate request for natural gas meters. Take it away.
Well, I mean, a meter is a meter. I mean, it's an inanimate object that measures a throughput and sends you other signals. The difference is to some extent will be a meter, but it's basically the product itself, electricity versus gas. You don't have as many opportunities or as wide a range of things to get efficiencies through gas metering, new meters, smart meters, as you do through electric. We think that on the margin, there is that customers who have gas meters, which are being put in at PG&E and putting in San Diego, will benefit from those meters, but it's not at the same level and extent that is the case with electric meters, and therefore it has raised a different level of concerns, I think it's fair to say, by the employees and some others at SoCal Gas, which is exclusively a gas company.
Okay. And the
It was put over for one. It was put over last Thursday for one meeting. It could be put over for a second meeting, but it may come up on April 8th or it may come up the 22nd. It's probably the latter.
And the fact that they're being put over, is that any indicator that the content of the final decision may change between now and then, or is it just more time to do more homework?
Both.
Okay.
Frankly, the content can change. It's probably a reflection of the fact that there's not absolute unanimity among the members of the commission, like there has been on some other things.
The follow-up question.
We'll see.
Follow-up question, not to that particular item before you, but smart meters in general. I know one of the concerns from some consumer groups has been that, well, utilities just want to do it, whether it's natural gas or electricity, because it'll make it easier to shut off service to people. You're the president of the commission. What you say, people take very, very seriously. So, as the head of the PUC, is that part of the intent or goals of the program?
No.
I know we talked about electric vehicles already. Want to spend a little bit on RPS. We kind of touched on some specific RPS-related questions today, but sort of as a whole, looking at the program, and there's yet again legislation this year on upping our renewable mandate in the state from 20% to 33%. On a scale of 1 to 10, or by any other measure, how successful do you think the renewable program has been thus far?
Well, I gave you statistics earlier saying that Edison was at 16.8%, approximately PG&E not quite 15% in its renewables, and that's better. That's excluding the large hydro. And San Diego at about 10%. The goal was to be at 20% by the end of this year, so I guess on that measurement you'd say we haven't achieved our goals. On the other hand, I think that we're reasonably close, and they're under contract, will be by 2012, 2013, we will have achieved the goals.
And this may sound odd to the members of the public, but I actually think that's a very good answer, at least for the purposes of my series of questions. You know, how do you measure success? Well, some of it's a little bit subjective. On the one hand, people will say, and people have told me, well, you're not at the 20% by 2010, so therefore it's been a failure. To that, I disagree, because from the onset of legislation, there's been growth in the renewable energy supply for California, both out of state but also in state. And we're striving to do more. Technology's been improving. Number of applications are up, et cetera, et cetera. So in that context, I think it's been a success. We haven't hit the goal that we initially laid out. But speaking of the goal,
I'm quite optimistic we could hit 33%, though, reasonably optimistic by 2020, if we cut through some of the transmission constraints and bottlenecks.
But for me, it prompts a yet even bigger question, which is the goal of our RPS program to hit the 20%, to hit the 33%, or is it to reduce greenhouse gas emissions, or is it both?
It's both, and there's another factor in there, too. I mean, we started down this RPS road 10 years ago or so before there was any concern about greenhouse gases by most people. I mean, we did it for national security reason and variety of supply. That argument remains. I mean, that's there as well. But now we have an additional reason that has given it more cogency, perhaps, and that is the concern about CO2, greenhouse gases, methane, and so forth. Yes.
So I'll agree with you from a national security standpoint. We're moving in the right direction. From a fuel diversity standpoint, we're moving in the right direction. From a cost standpoint, I slightly disagree with Senator Dutton. I think it's too early to tell. If one of the criticisms about the renewable program is that not enough is online already, and Senator Dutton is looking at his energy bill having gone up in recent years, how is that attributable to renewable energy costs being incrementally higher if the renewable energy isn't flowing yet? So to what do we attribute the recent increases in energy? But put that aside for a second. From a greenhouse gas reduction standpoint, how do we measure how successful the renewables program is towards meeting our greenhouse gas reduction goals?
I have the chart here somewhere, but what we can do on the renewables is a very significant but not as compelling a CO2 reduction program as changing the carbon content of fuel and changing the standards for light-duty vehicles. Then I think the renewables come through.
So when you say fuel in that answer, that's not fuel for our electricity supply, but for our transportation fleet?
Correct. Correct. Those are the two biggest chunks. There's three. Then renewables are a very big contributor to that, and then there's the idea of a cap-and-trade kind of program is a factor.
But is GHG reduction something that you measure as part of the RPS program?
Absolutely.
How much you can directly quantify
absolutely.
or attribute
I think it's critically important. to reduce CO2 emissions.
Well, I'd love to follow up with you and get some
The
more.
more frustrating one is the CSI doesn't show the same kind of exciting numbers as do solar photovoltaic and wind and some other programs.
Okay.
They all
I'll be
reduce-
following up with you for some additional background information. A quick, not a policy question, but a question I believe you can appreciate. I've shared with you privately. I've shared with several of my colleagues here a trip I and a couple of the members of the Senate Energy Committee did about 2 weeks ago, both to New York and to D.C. And in Washington, we met with the Department of Energy, with FERC, with some of our colleagues on the Hill. But in New York, among other meetings, we had a chance to visit with some of the bond houses, the Fitch, S&P, Moody's as well. Not on behalf of the state of California, let me be clear, and not behalf on any particular utility. Let me be abundantly clear. But just to have the conversation from the credit rating agency's perspective and some other folks in the Wall Street world, if you will, on behalf of the finance folks, the investor folks that provide the capital indirectly to make all this happen. You're familiar with those sorts of meetings and conversations. Not that they dictate what we do, but it's a perspective we ought to be listening to. Can you comment on the value of those sorts of meetings or conversations?
Well, yes, they give the rating agencies, of which Moody's and Standard & Poor's and Fitch are the three biggest and most well known, and Moody's and Standard & Poor's in New York, is that the ratings that they give to the utility bonds are direct cost to the California consumers. So it's just the same as the state here. When the state gets a downgrade due to Moody's or Standard & Poor's, it costs more money to borrow. Utilities face the same thing. So we have a long-term interest in a cooperative environment in which the utilities are economically healthy. Not overly healthy, but economically healthy enough so that we get the best bond ratings. And I think that those rating agencies, by and large, view California positively in that regard.
Right. That's the feedback I certainly got too. After the initial questions of, there goes California again. You're always on the cutting edge. It makes us nervous. So I had a chance to remind them, hey, you've been nervous for 30 years, and we're still here. So don't be so nervous. Couple quick questions on the telecommunications side of things. Tomorrow, we anticipate the long-awaited National Broadband Plan to be released by the FCC. Just like with the energy side, on the broadband side, California tends to sort of lead the way. And we did our mapping exercise a couple of years ago. We know 96% of Californians have some access to broadband, but there's still more work to do and a long way to go. Anything unique to California as far as issues or challenges that we think may be pointed out in the plan?
Well, no, I'll ask Jack if he wants to comment on that. But I already expressed earlier my absolute frustration in round one of money for broadband expansion through the NTIA, which is part of the U.S. Department of Commerce, that we applied for $1.1 billion and the state got $24.6 million. I mean, that's a paltry amount. And that's a failure of the PUC, the legislature, the governors, and the administration, all of us, to not have done a better job looking at our legislative leadership in Washington. We're hardly a small, insignificant place. And we have to do much better. Now, there's a round two and all of that. I think that, this is like, I don't want to gild the lily here, but your leadership on the California Advanced Services Fund, Senator, and the extension of that fund to extend broadband services to rural unserved communities and underserved communities in urban areas like South Central Los Angeles, I think is incredibly important. And I think California, to some extent, and this is sad to say, was penalized because we have done relatively well compared to other places. And there's a tendency to say, well, you need it more here or you need it more there. I'm not sure all the ingredients there, but I was very frustrated. Now, as to the FCC broadband release, which will be tomorrow, Jack, do you want to comment on any particular?
Well, I guess let me define the specifics for either you or you. For years and years and years, when it's come to broadband, the discussion, debate, the policy goals have been deployment, making sure people have a pipe running through their neighborhood, if you will. And for the first time that I'm aware of, under the Obama administration, we've expanded the conversation to not just be about deployment, but to be about adoption as well. And one of the recommendations that we hear will be part of the report is to redefine universal service to include broadband and the sort of internet access adoption piece of it as well. What would that stir at the PUC level in terms of our current programs and incentives?
Well, it's sure a lot of work, but go ahead. If you want to.
The only thing that I would offer is that we're hearing the same information, and before the Commission this year and for the last 18 months, we've been looking at the next phase of universal service, and the whole idea of how to expand it to include broadband at a price California can afford. It has been an issue for our PUC, and from reading the executive summary of the national program, it looks like that's going to be part of the national debate as well.
You know, we rank, the United States ranks, you know, in the world 10th or 12th in broadband, not only in its ubiquitousness, but by speed. And South Korea ranks first. It's absolutely amazing. And South Korea is also a rural country. It's not all, and everybody doesn't live in Seoul. And Japan ranks ahead of the United States, and there are several others. California ranks ahead of the nation by a good margin. I mean, but we, and that's probably a reflection of some of the things that why we didn't get as much in what I just said. And we don't get anything out of the rural utility services Department of Agriculture. We're defined away as if we had no agriculture at all in California, which is really kind of weird.
But I think it's going to stimulate some great questions and discussions that we'll be working on, not just on the broadband deployment versus adoption piece, but even on the broadband access, with more and more people first accessing broadband via smartphones, and regulations and authority and jurisdiction before me is different from a landline perspective versus a wireless perspective.
Absolutely.
So we have a lot of work ahead of us, absolutely. My last question has to do with coming back to the jobs and the workforce piece. I know the Assembly Committee had a hearing recently on workforce, specifically a recent hearing on the Senate side dealing with broadband, including DIVCA, had a workforce panel or element of that hearing. And one of the things that we heard from folks representing the workers in the industry is that with job cuts, job transfers, in-state, out-of-state, et cetera, that it's leading towards quality being compromised. Is this something that's on your radar at the commission level or as president of the commission?
The answer to that question is yes, and that's why I said earlier about the need to not only we need to have we have a retiring workforce, and we need to have at the technical level an enhancement of the skill set of people that are going into these apprenticeship jobs and many other things, and hopefully the whole interest in green jobs and in the solar field and others will stimulate a lot of that. But it's not going to just happen accidentally. It's going to take the cooperation in the case of where I'm involved with the utilities, working with the community colleges and other educational groups in trying to enhance that pipeline and to do it in a way that satisfies Assemblymember Swanson in a course, which is what we are trying to do. But I mean, it's an incredible challenge for this state overall.
Well, that's the workforce side, and maybe it's a question better directed at DRA when they come up next. Whether there's been, the customer complaints, if you will, that the service is suffering due to insufficient workforce or anything along those lines. Thank you, Mr. Fuentes.
Senator Oropeza.
Thank you. Just I'd like to follow up on one of the issues that Chair Padilla mentioned, and that was shutoffs. And it's my understanding that in the PG&E area there have been over 500,000 shutoffs in the last year. And it's also my understanding that low-income residents have been impacted. There's been a spike of 40% in the last year of shutoffs in low-income residences. And what I'd like to ask you is if you think there are any sort of universal policies or approaches or whatever you want to call it that might be applied across the board in regulating utilities to address this issue of shutoffs and how we handle them?
Yes, I do. I do think there are some universal, well, maybe not universal, but statewide anyway.
Yeah.
And we were faced with this problem before Christmas. All the utilities agreed with some prompting from the Commission to do a moratorium on shutoffs over the Christmas holidays, and one continued it through Martin Luther King Day. The other two did not. We had a voluntary workshop that I stimulated to look at best practices of all the utilities and to try to get them to voluntarily work together to accept the best practices in each utility. There's, depending on the particular circumstance. That didn't work. Put it bluntly, it didn't work. So we're doing an OIR, what we call order instituting rulemaking, and we're going to come up with those rules
So you do
all the utilities, so it will be universal for the state of California, because I was not satisfied with the outcome the way it was handled.
I think that's great. I appreciate the answer. Good. Thank you.
Very good. Seeing no additional questions, thank you, President Peavy, for your presence and your testimony today. With that, I'd like to invite Dana Appling, Director of the Division of Ratepayer Advocates, to give us an overview from the Division of Ratepayer Advocates.
Good afternoon, Chairman Fuentes and Chairman Padilla when he comes back, senators and members. Thank you very much for the opportunity to appear before you. I'll try to be very brief. I know that the hour is late. I just want you to be familiar with DRA and what we do and how we do it, and I'll try to go through that as quickly as possible. We are, I don't know if you would say compliment or antithesis to President Peavy, but I think it's more a compliment. We are housed at the PUC, but we're an independent division of the PUC, meaning that we come up with our own policies, we have our own budget, and we do our own work without commission influence, without undue commission influence. We are statutorily mandated to try to represent the customers, the ratepayers themselves, and to try to obtain the lowest possible rate for utility service consistent with safety and reliability. We're also mandated by the legislature to appear before you and do an accounting of our resources, our budget, etc. There are annual reports that go into the details on what our budget is and what our resources are. We're up to about 140 staff members now, or at least authorized positions. But what we do is to act as a party in the PUC proceedings, and President Peavy referred to doing cost-benefit analysis. Well, that is exactly what we do. The utilities come in and they are there to implement the policies and that the legislature and the commission have adopted for the utilities to implement, and they come in and they ask for money to do this, of course, and the money comes from the ratepayers. So what we do is analyze the information that they provide, and with our staff of experts go through and do auditing and analysis. We do discovery, expert witness testimony. It's like a semi-judicial hearing where we make a final recommendation based on the information and analysis that we do that very typically and most always comes in less than what the utility is requesting. And we do the cost-benefit analysis in doing that. The information that we provide is absolutely crucial to the commission, to the commissioners, because otherwise they would only have the utility perspective on what is needed and what is wanted. We represent the ratepayers because they're the ones who are going to have to pay for these very, very, and you've heard President Peavy say it several times, very expensive programs. So we want to make sure that the ratepayer gets, as much as we can, the value for the dollar that they put into these programs. We don't necessarily want to see gold plating. We want to see that they get what they are paying for, and they are paying very dearly for many of these programs. We also appear before other state agencies where utilities that are under the jurisdiction of the Commission are impacted. We come to the legislature, we lobby here, we take positions on bills. We participate in informational and bill hearings, technical workshops, and we offer our technical assistance to members of the legislature on issues that you're looking at as well. In 2009, ratepayers savings and protections, we calculate that our efforts have helped to save $3.3 billion for ratepayers during that year, including but not limited to about $3 billion in energy and $37 million in water. There have been additional achievements through cost avoidance and communications, because it's difficult to quantify there because we don't do cost regulation or price regulation of the utilities. That could translate to about $125 saved for each ratepayer. Let's see, how I said, DRA saved ratepayers $125 for each $1 allocated in our budget. So I think we actually pay for ourselves. We do participate in the PUC hearings as to how we come about this. It's crucial for the commissioners to know the impact that the policies and the requests that the utilities make are going to be on ratepayers, because that's the only way they can make an informed decision as a decision-making body, to have the perspectives of the stakeholders. And one of the number one stakeholders is the ratepayers themselves. We participated in 193 proceedings, filed 657 pleadings last year. We're up in the commissioner's offices lobbying 385 times, and protested more than 100 advice letters. And advice letters are an informal proceedings that are proliferating at the commission, because the utilities are coming in trying to do by this informal process what they really should be doing by an application where there's a hearing and more light and transparency on the process, where DRA can come in and do the analysis that is needed for what they're asking for, where the advice letter process could bypass all that. But under the proper circumstances, that's what an advice letter is for, where it's non-controversial. And there's a few other criteria which these don't always meet, but the utilities are utilizing it, which just takes our time. And we protested, and often the commission understands and sees that this isn't the right process, but it still takes time and resources to get that over to them. Energy, let's see. We've been active before the legislature over this past year, around 2009, in the areas of renewable portfolio standard, the AB1X reform, greenhouse gas emissions, energy utility service disconnections, energy efficiency, and a lifeline telephone service. Accomplishments in 2009, I mentioned that for energy we saved $3.3 billion by challenging the utilities, and you can see on slide number 8 the areas where that occurred. $900 million for the IOU energy efficiency portfolios, $480 million for PG&E pensions, and $100 million on the smart meter issues. Our priorities in energy going forward in 2010 are cost-effective achievement. well, number one is IOU rate increases. One of the biggest things that affects what ratepayers are going to have to shell out in terms of energy bills is the revenue requirement of the utilities. These are the rates that people pay. And the revenue requirements go up every year by billions of dollars. And so we're very, very focused on what the utilities are asking for. Again, doing our analysis, making sure that they justify everything that they ask for, that they do the proper analysis, that our analysis finds mistakes that everybody makes from time to time, and recommend lower rates or lower revenue than what the utility is asking for, to the extent that they don't justify in what they put before the commission getting something greater. Now, we could agree with the utility and do often. It's not that we always say no to what they ask for, but show us what you're going to use it for, show us the justification for it, and we may go along with it. So the revenue increases is the number one thing we focus on. We would also like to see cost-effective achievement, and that's what the cost-benefit analysis and renewable goals, greenhouse gas goals, energy efficiency, smart meter deployment, and we would really love to see utility disconnections be mitigated. We also do reviews for our water companies. As I said earlier, we calculate that we've saved ratepayers about $37 million for the intergeneral rate cases for water. And as President Peavy mentioned, the PUC only regulates about 20% of the water providers in California. So the numbers are much smaller, but you can see from the percentage reductions, 55%, that these savings can be significant. We push for costs and for rationing plans to apply only in regions for water where they're experiencing water shortages. We've done auditing of, in this case, mentioned Cal American Water's revenue adjustment mechanism that saved $1.4 million, and that's just going in and looking at their paperwork and finding mistakes. And again, protested the improper advice letters. Priorities in 2010 for water is to lower rates. Water conservation is a big deal for us. Water supply solutions, and to protect ratepayers' interests and to keep the process, the integrity of the process at the PUC intact, because that's the only way ratepayers have a viable voice, is that their voices are heard through us and other consumer groups. Under communications, there's the Lifeline telephone program that we hope comes back. We held a Lifeline forum with Assemblyman Fuentes a couple of months ago, I think before the end of the year, where we explored ways that the Lifeline for wireless communications need to be vetted, and some of those issues worked out before we can implement a Lifeline program, and we'd like to see that come back in 2010, and I think President Peavy said that it would come back. Service quality and reliability is an issue, service contracts, and public safety in communications areas. Again, our priorities in communications are customer protection, Lifeline, telephone program, broadband, video franchise license holders, and again, public safety. While I'm here, I get to the end, I would like to introduce my executive staff. This is Phyllis White, who is our Deputy Director over Communication and Water. And Dave Ashukian is our Deputy Director over our 3 energy branches, which is, well, they're not quite half and half, maybe 2/3 and 1/3. And we have our Chief Counsel in the back, and Matthew Marcus, who you may know is our legislative liaison. We very much offer our services to you if you need technical assistance or just another perspective on things from the ratepayer point of view, and that's how we look at it, from the ratepayer point of view, but not in a vacuum. We have to consider safety and reliability by statute, and I think we couldn't do a good job unless we did take those things in consideration. We also look at environmental considerations and consumer protection. So that's speed racing through the presentation, and if you have any questions, I or one of my staff can definitely answer you.
Thank you, Ms. Sapling, for that presentation, and thank you for co-hosting that Lifeline Forum that we had on December 17th. It was a very memorable occasion and very helpful to me. So with that, Assemblymember Skinner.
Yes, thank you for joining us and for giving your presentation and giving us an overview of your office's services and functions. As you hinted, and as we know, the number of disconnects, service disconnects for utility ratepayers has greatly increased in all of our service territories. Your presentation mentions that your office has a role in helping mitigate that. Can you be explicit about some ways that that has been mitigated, or plans that you have to further assist in mitigation of that?
Well, it was actually a report that came out of our office that published the findings, and the information came directly from the utilities. We put it together and packaged it and showed it to the commission. As President Peavy said, the commissioners took a very well chosen interest in this issue and tried to get the utilities to voluntarily come up with some programs to mitigate, and they did not in the long run. So what we did was suggest that the commission could do some things on their own, including opening up an OIR to get the issues discussed and something done through the participation of the utilities as well as consumer groups as well as the utilities. But we also recommended, and the commission did order it in the interim until the OIR is done, is that reconnection fees be dispensed with. And that's just another fee on top of another fee that puts these people further into the hole when they can't pay. And as someone pointed out earlier, it is mostly low-income people who are feeling the brunt of this. And that the utilities are required to negotiate payment plans for at least 3 months, and they could go to 12 months with people who are in need of some assistance in getting their bills paid. Was there another item?
One of the other items was delaying remote disconnects until the investigation was over.
But the commission didn't order that. We recommended it, but the commission did not order remote disconnects be dispensed with. Smart meter disconnects. So they didn't do that, although we recommended that they not.
Are you continuing to track the number of disconnects? Because while the commission may not have acted fully on all the recommendations, it's anecdotal, but my office's information would indicate that the disconnects are continuing, rising. Thus, it might be appropriate to go back to the commission. The unfortunate situation is that we often see the disconnects higher in the winter months, while yes, it can be quite uncomfortable to be without air conditioning in the summer. It is it's a health hazard. Well, it can be a health hazard also in heat raises, but it's in a time of a heat wave. But it's a clear health hazard to be without utility connection in the cold winter months, and that's often when we see the disconnects rise.
Yeah, we are continuing to monitor the data that comes in for disconnects, and the utilities did not agree, and I don't think we recommended that there would be no disconnections at all, but that they wouldn't be piling on all of the fees that are attendant to disconnections pending the rulemaking that's coming out and getting the issues dealt with during them. But we're going to continue to collect the data and make recommendations as we see fit going forward. We think that there's a lot that the utilities can be doing that they have already have the authority to do, but best practices aren't being utilized, in our opinion, in all cases. And there's quite a discrepancies between the three big electric and gas utilities and how they handle things. And as you noted, PG&E is the one with the most disconnections, and we think that they could benefit from some of the best practices that have been displayed by some of the other, or at least San Diego Gas and Electric.
So I'm sure there are many members of the legislature who would encourage you to continue your watchdog role in this matter.
Absolutely.
Members, any additional questions? Mr. Senator Flores.
Thank you. I just wanted to ask you some questions to follow up Mr. Peavy's comments on smart meters. And I'd like to get your take. You're the ratepayer advocate. Mr. Peavy mentioned a mere 1,000 complaints. What is your role in those complaints?
We don't necessarily, we don't take the complaints. There's a Consumer Affairs branch who takes the individual complaints from the individual consumers. We do see some of it, and we do have some role with the smart meter issue. I believe we're going to audit and monitor the results that the contractor, once the PUC gets it up and going, will come up with. So we're going to oversee that.
Okay.
We do the big proceedings. We don't do individual complaints, but we can, from the Consumer Affairs branch, go in and see where the trends are and what people are complaining about.
Okay, so what is the trend? Is it important enough with 1,000 people complaining that you would be involved?
1,000 is a lot to me, and I think so. And we definitely are involved. Did you want to add anything?
Yeah, I would just add that we've made recommendations to the Energy Division on how to conduct that independent study, and we will look at the results. So in that sense, yes, we have been involved, and we are planning to look at, again, what the results are of those investigations of individual customers. As far as the trends go, we do see a very obvious pattern of both in the Central Valley, and now we're seeing it in other areas where the meters have been deployed, that the monthly consumption numbers don't seem to be consistent with prior to and post meter installation.
Okay.
So that certainly is a pattern that we have seen.
Okay. Just to not take too much time, but I'm trying to understand what it is you do.
What is it?
What is it you do? Because you are the Office of Ratepayer Advocate, correct?
Yeah.
And you say you get involved in the big policy decisions. What was your participation when smart meters were rolled out in 2006? What was the position that your office took in that big policy rollout?
Well, like I said, we look at what the utilities present as their justification for the money that they're asking for. They wanted to deploy what they called smart meters, and this was going to help individuals, each individual in their own households, monitor in real time the amount of energy that they were using so that they can cut back on energy use and save money themselves. So we take that information and say, well, how much in a cost-benefit analysis is that going to weigh with all the other operational benefits that they say are going to occur, many of which are because they won't need meter readers anymore. And you get the operational benefits on top of the demand response benefits. And at that time, when PG&E first started and they first came out, demand response was a big deal. It was, it was the panacea because people were going to be able to monitor real time with little displays in their house and change what their usage is and save money. So we do the quantitative analysis on that, and we combine the operational and the demand response benefits, and I think we got to a 1 or 1 point something demand benefit. However, our position was at the time that they were going too fast, that the technology in just a few months, would probably surpass what PG&E had put on the table at the time. We recommended that they not be, I don't remember how much less money or whether they not be given, but we were in opposition to them going forward at that time because, well, we did get a good cost-benefit analysis, but we did ask that there be delayed because now I'm thinking about it, we did come up with a 1. So we thought it was going to be cost-effective, but did recommend that there be a slight delay in the implementation, which didn't occur, and then they had to come back.
Right. They came back and spent an additional $500 million replacing the new meters with newer meters.
Yes.
And you heard Mr. Peavy say that the person that took the hit on that was the ratepayer.
Absolutely.
And so you're the ratepayer advocate. So what are you doing now that we are in full rollout and we have over 1,000 complaints? Your job isn't to look at the complaints, but what level do the complaints raise a larger policy issue with the rollout themselves? For example, there's a class action suit right now, as you know. What position will the ratepayer advocate take in that type of a suit? Do you watch it? Do you participate? Are you...
We have not participated in a class action suit, and I'm not sure. It depends on what it's going to look like and whether we would serve a role for ratepayers that would be consistent with our statutory mandate, et cetera. We'd have to see what the consultant comes up with and then what our review and monitoring of the consultant's work is going to look like. We think that there are some issues. We're just not far along enough in that process to make that determination. But I think that we would not shrink from representing the ratepayer interest as long as it was consistent with our mandate. And we can legally get into something like that. And we've not done that before, so that would be new territory.
Okay, I don't have any more questions. I'm sorry.
I just want to add that you heard President Peavy talk about the AMI is both for gas and electric. Currently before the commission is the request from Southern Cal Gas for AMI for gas customers only, and we have taken a strong position against that because our analysis shows that for gas customers, AMI is not cost effective. The assumed conservation benefit is not there for gas because, one, there's no time of use value on your gas consumption, and secondly, the information that customers will get from their gas meters is not real time. It is after the fact, a day ahead, day later, sometimes a week later. Right. And so getting that information later isn't necessarily going to change consumer behavior. You already get your monthly bill. You know when you're using gas, right. You're using, and you're costing money.
Right. I'll just say, and I don't want to monopolize the committee's time, but it seems to me that the Ratepayers Advocates Office, given your very hesitant view in 2006 and reading the rate case that you put forward, it did say, indeed, that you were worried about the demand response number. You were worried about the particular depreciation in this case, and you were worried about a whole host of issues. And now we've rolled these out. You have over 1,000 people plus, which I think is a significant number, quite frankly, in a particular area that feels that they have overpaid. They call the PUC. Where PUC has not had a hearing in that particular area. The PUC doesn't seem to me to have solved any of these. So at some point, somebody turns and says, what does a Ratepayer Advocates Office do? And that's the reason I'm asking you that, because at some point, some level, you should participate in terms of even some solutions. And you've mentioned giving the customer the ability to know what their usage is, having the ability to have in-home displays in their homes so we can actually adjust. That was the whole purpose of this. But yet there's no in-home displays anywhere in the near future, at least in the next couple of months when these things go in. And I would venture to say that even the members of the PUC themselves couldn't go out to their smart meter and look at their meter outside and tell whether they're using more or less electricity. So it seems to be a one-way communication for a utility, but yet not the two-way communication that was promised to allow consumers to bring down their consumption, thereby meeting the goals of the program. And I just would hope that your office would participate more than monitoring, but actually participating in proactive actions such as pushing for in-home demand types of solutions to it. And I do know that I know money is tight, but I'm not sure how much that would cost. But I also know PG&E is paying about $35 million for an initiative. We could take a little bit of that money, it seems, and maybe give people in-home displays and make it workable as a smart meter unit so the customer has some sort of value and they get what they're paying for. So that's my only comment.
Okay, we will take that to heart and see what we can do going forward.
Assemblymember Carter? Very good. Senator Padilla?
Once again, just a couple of sort of closeout questions. Hope you heard me ask the first question to Chairman Peavy when he was at the podium there, and that was, have you had a marked increase in complaints from folks on their, I guess, user subscribers from AT&T or Fios subscribers from Verizon on quality of service or customer service response? We're hearing that from some of the workforce representatives, and I wanted to check in with you to see if that's the case.
Phyllis, do you have any information on that?
We are monitoring, we are looking at the...
Put your mic. Oops.
No, I think it
turned
was.
it
I'll
off.
push it again. Just speak a little bit closer to it.
We are monitoring the CAB data, the complaint data that is made at the commission. We are with the idea of mapping it and to analyze, find out any trends. So far, we haven't seen anything that's related to the Fios deployment. We've seen other trends related more to cramming. We've seen a spike in that, and we are pursuing that problem, trying to find what's the source of it and what companies are involved. But in terms of Fios itself, have not so far seen anything, but we are continuing to monitor the data.
Okay. Well, I'm sure you'll keep us posted
Yes.
as issues arise. The other is, again, a topic I raised with Chairman Peavy on the broadband side of things, with the broadband report coming out tomorrow. The conversation, step in the right direction, in my opinion, of expanding universal service to include broadband. Any thoughts or initial work on your part for recommendations to the PUC as we revisit all the regs and policies in place currently?
Well, I think that it's something that DRA will want to look at very closely. I think it would be consistent with our mission, but it's something that we will have to explore the pros and cons. There are some cost implications. Certainly, the benefits are clear, but there are some serious cost implications.
Well, similar to, I think, the tone and the spirit with which Senator Flores asked a few questions, I'd encourage you to not just monitor, but participate and be more proactive. I mean, here's a huge opportunity that the President is presenting to us to address the digital divide. Mm-hmm. And it's not just a digital divide issue of, where companies are deploying this technological tool, but to the extent that we're not just putting the pipe out in certain communities, but doing the adoption piece, the literacy piece, the actual participation and benefit piece for communities that have historically been written out, is a tremendous opportunity. And I think we have an obligation to exercise all of our tools. I know I am legislatively. Mm-hmm. I know I will with the commissioners, but you're the Division of Ratepayer Advocate. There's public monies going through these programs. I hope that you're as aggressive and as ambitious as possible in ensuring the full benefit of all of this. So please don't just monitor. Please participate. Please be proactive. And I'll end with just sort of one comment in one area that most people wouldn't even imagine is a digital divide issue. When we get the smart meter piece right, it doesn't just land toward a smarter grid from a transmission standpoint or a distribution standpoint, but the smart home piece, most importantly, giving people the tools they need to manage their energy use and save money, is both for the purposes of saving energy and saving money, but reducing emissions as a result. we will not achieve our environmental goals or generate the environmental benefit that we're capable of if people continue to be disconnected digitally from that system. So we can have the broadband deployed everywhere, we can have the smart meters deployed everywhere, but if people like my parents, for example, that never worked in an environment where they had a PC on their desk, aren't able to adjust the thermostat remotely or do those sorts of things that technology is making possible, we're selling ourselves way short, and we're selling Californians way short. We have to raise the bar here. Thank you.
Very good. Members, any other questions? Director Appling, thank you so much for your presence and testimony today. We're going to go ahead and move to public comment. Is there any public comment? Seeing none, we're going to go ahead and adjourn this meeting. Thank you very much.